I think this channel, though, like, in order to make my point, I'm gonna have to resort to one of the I didn't wanna have to go into this or talk about this particular issue, but this one, when it comes to the war on drugs, and I mean, I realize I've already said quite a bit on the drug controversy about where I think that things need to go and towards harm reduction and my own vision when it comes to dealing with this problem. I am very much so supportive of drug, use rooms and, of just giving people, like, the stuff that they're addicted to, but apparently, that's unthinkable in Washington. Washington has its own point of view on this, and I did tell you that I'm the ultimate outsider when it comes to politics and everything within my own country, and there's a huge reason why I feel like I was born here, but I'm not really from here. The politics don't represent me at all. The politicians that run through here don't actually have views that look anything like my own at all. I am not just claiming to be a Washington outsider, I'm claiming to be even more than a Washington outsider in that I didn't go to the same schools as they did. I haven't been through college the way that they have. I don't think the way that they do, and even if I were to go through college and come out and emerge on the other side of the experience, I still would probably take a view that represents, very close to the one I'm currently presenting to you. It would not it might change it somewhat, but it wouldn't fully have the impact of completely transforming my perspective to be a 180 against what I currently believe. I don't think the way that the Washington insider crowd does. I don't think the way they do, and I think that it's important to note that because, when somebody claims that they're an outsider these days, it's often them being an outsider in a very vacant fashion, you know, in the sense that, like, I didn't come from power, that's what they're trying to say, but I'm trying to say something that's even more essential in that I don't think the way the in crowd in Washington thinks at all. My ideology doesn't even come close to representing or being, resembling the point of view that's being represented by the elites over there in Washington. Um, but now we need to drift to Rodrigo Duterte, you know. Unfortunately, because Rodrigo Duterte, I believe, is guilty of massive human rights violations, and I would like to see The Hague deal with the man. I don't care that he happens to be popular in the Philippines. Um, the truth of the matter is that he's very much so a human rights abuser in a huge way, and I'm not making friends in the Philippines to say this about Rodrigo Duterte, but I did kind of want to make a sort of half-hearted, begrudging hats off to the Duterte administration, but it's sort of a backhanded salute to him as a person. You see, the Rodrigo Duterte government over there in the Philippines, for you Americans who know so little about the world outside of your country, one of the biggest things that increased this man's infamy is that his regime went so much further than even just allowing the cops to kill, low-level drug offenders and the dealers that they managed to get their hands on. It, in fact, gave them a bounty for doing it. It went so much further and so much deeper than than that. The bodies in the Philippines have been piling up ever since Rodrigo came to power in the Philippines, But one thing that has not actually happened and transpired is an end to its battle on crystal meth, which is what began the whole fight in the first place. In the Philippines, the Rodrigo Duterte government begrudgingly had to acknowledge at some point that it had not managed to actually solve the problem or come close to actually And in the Philippines, they refer to crystal meth as Sabu, and they had to begrudgingly acknowledge that they had not actually made nearly as much progress on Sabu as they had actually desired to. Crystal meth is a terrible drug. I would not recommend that you even try it, to be honest with you. I would discourage you heavily from even attempting this particular, drug. I do, however, believe that quite a bit of the imagery that we have seen has been manipulated by, the power structure. We're not really getting a completely accurate picture of it. It is still, nevertheless, a substance that I do not recommend that you take under any conditions. We have a tendency to, in this country, to have a lot of uh, hysteria in the media. Like there's a term they use for it. I forget exactly what they're going. I forget what it is, but when they're talking about the way that sensationalism, yeah, in the media is kind of the norm, and so you get a lot of sensationalism around crystal meth, and it's not, quite what it's being presented as, but it's still a very nasty, nasty problem that we're beset by as a country. That it's tragic, and it's been a true tragedy, for the country. But Duterte's government, my sort of begrudgingly, my thanks to the Duterte government is that it did this. I think that he should be held accountable for it. But on the upside of the Duterte government's experiment with this particular policy, the thing is that it gave us what who are against the drug war a test case to prove a point, you know? And this, I think, was really rather, what I'm trying to do here is to say thank you for at least conducting this type of experiment, because now we can use it to really prove the point that you were a waste of time as a president. The truth about the Duterte government, he's immensely popular in the Philippines. It's debatable whether he deserves to be. I think that he shouldn't be, but you know, I will admit that the crystal meth problem is a fucking tragedy in a huge way for the Philippines. But I think that the criminalization approach to dealing with these problems has been mistaken all along. Um, but Duterte's government was engaging in extrajudicial murder. They weren't putting these people on trial. They weren't putting them through the court system. They were just killing them. When they were caught with it or they were caught selling it. You know, so this is so key and everything. The Duterte government and its policy is instructive, in the sense that we should learn from it here in the United States, and not from the policy, but from the results of the policy, which was a failure. You know, Sabu or crystal meth, as I prefer terminology because I'm from the United States, is still a massive problem in the Philippines, and that's tragic. But again, the same kind of thinking that has been attempted so many times in the past is exactly what we need to get away from when it comes to the war on drugs. We need new thinking as far as it's concerned, and unfortunately, what we've been beset by is more of the same piled upon more of the same piled on more of the same. But Duterte's government is instructive in exactly that kind of way, in which what it does is it teaches us, if you believe that in the United States, some of the people that are at the very forefront of our war on drugs want to basically flog these people and kill them in the streets absent a trial. It wants to do terrible things to them out in the open, just as a warning to anybody that would think about selling or using within the United States. It wants to make an example of them. and embarrass them and do awful things, even kill them, in the streets, and it's just, if you believe in your heart, or you think that this government can use an escalation of force to tamp down on things, and that the people that are using or dealing will stop when the consequences are escalated to the point of death without even so much as a trial. If you think that there is a way that this government can innovate its use of force when it comes to the war on drugs, and innovate its way to, using an innovative force strategy to win this one, the Duterte's government conducted the experiment that will tell the world and inform the world how exactly a policy of extrajudicial murder, and even bounties being given to the police for this, works out in the world, Because there is one thing that is very unique about the war on drugs. While a lot of people love to argue that, the United States is a unique country, it is. Admittedly, the US is not a racially homogenous society. We are a multicultural country that a lot of countries don't have, you know, to contend with, the differences and of cultures that existed, and the meshment of cultures that exist in the United States. That's just not something that a lot of other countries struggle with. But that issue of multiculturalism is a distraction. It's a red herring, and it's completely irrelevant to the debate. When a policy fails in one country on the war on drugs, it teaches us how the same policy will work for every country in the world. There is absolutely no good reason, really, ultimately, to suspect that if a policy of extrajudicial murder failed the Philippines, that it can succeed in the United States. It can't, and the Philippines just taught us that. If you think that there is a creative escalation of force that the United States could use to win this one, you need to think again and examine what happened to crystal meth in the Philippines as a result of exactly that kind of adventurism and policy experimentalism being conducted. I am no fan of the Duterte government. My thank you to him is very backhanded. It's a thank you on the sense of thank you for teaching us that there is no hope of what they're trying to basically succeed in doing, that down this road. That the dark road of executing drug dealers and users will not ultimately win the war on drugs. The incentive to use and sell the drug itself under its use screws you up so fucking badly that you really don't care about anything other than your next high, and so you will risk death to get it. And for the dealers, it can be so insanely profitable that you don't think of anything else other than the profits. You know, so death itself is not enough of a deterrent to stop the sale and distribution of crystal meth. And if you think that the problem is just that there are so many policies here in the United States, and that these motherfuckers have the right to due process and all that shit's what's preventing us from, really clamping down on the problem, you're dead wrong. You need to re-examine things. There is no way our government can't throw enough money into its use of force to deal with this problem. And in fact, if it had a limitless budget, if it truly had one that had no limit and unlimited money, it still would not be able to win the war on drugs. There is no amount of money this government can use in trying to force its way off of drugs that will succeed. I I hate to break it to you, the limits of this have become obvious that we can't really spend our way to victory in this war, in this drug war. Now I know that, for a lot of people and for a lot of minds, it's simply reducing the amount of drug use may be a policy worth embracing because it gets a few people off. I don't necessarily disagree, particularly when it comes to the harder drugs, but Duterte's government has not ultimately solved this fucking problem. You know, he went for the ultimate price that people could pay, and even without a trial, you know, it failed. The policy has been a failure in the Philippines at actually solving the drug problem, the drug epidemic that the country is beset by. The Duterte government should walk away from this in shame at the massive failure of his policy. Now I know that he has left office as one of the most popular politicians in the Philippines. You know, I guess it was colorful advocating such an extreme policy, but the truth of the matter is that it didn't work out. I don't know what else to tell you, but his government's failure is very instructive because how it failed there means it would fail here in the United States. That is.